Hi there. Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Kyle Krumsick. For those of you who don't know, I've actually grown up at Port Naz pretty much from the time when I was young. I've gone through children's ministry with Pastor Barbie, junior high with Pastor Mike, and high school with Pastor Chad before he's in his new position that he's in now as family pastor. And throughout my entire time here, I've always been involved in some way, shape, or form, whether it's on some sort of team with Pastor Barbie or helping Pastor Mike and Chad in some way. And even to the point where my sophomore and junior year of college, I actually came back and I interned here for 2 summers before taking a job after my senior year of college as a full-time youth pastor. And right now I'm currently in my master's program at Point Loma, master's in Christian ministry, and with the hope of, after continuing my education, to get my MDiv at Nazarene Theological Seminary. And currently I'm in this class right now called Christian Mission in Local Context. And this class has taught me so much about the realities of racism and racial injustice and racial division that's in our country. And it's also taught me another thing. It's also taught me how or new ways to look at the church and how the church is connecting and influencing not only those who are within the church, but those who are outside the church in the community around them, and how the church loves and disciples and cares for and comes alongside with and partners with those who are inside and outside the church. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to bring us on this journey of asking this question: how can Port Naz specifically be for Porterville? And how can they be for Porterville? And you're going to see that language a lot. I'm going to explain what that means right now. So this language of this question of what does being for Porterville mean? And the first part of that is it's a mission. It's a mission, and it's an idea, and it's a theological practice that pushes us to constantly ask ourselves as a church, how can we be for the community? How can we connect with them? How can we love on them? How can we provide for them? How can we support them? And it asks questions. It leads us into asking questions as we go into that question section. How do we lead our city towards Jesus? How do we be Christ to our city? And like I said a second ago, how do we love, support, care for, and demand justice for our community? And the last part, or the third part of what being for Porterville means is this type of theology, this idea does not take away from what Port Naz is already doing in the areas of discipleship and growing. But what this does, it actually encourages Port Naz to disciple well so that they can disciple well. So encourages Port Naz to disciple well so that they can, in return, disciple others well. But also what this mission and this idea and this theological practice produces is it produces influence that the church has over the city. So this language of Port Naz for Porterville speaks to both the non-believer and the believer. And how it speaks to the non-believer is it speaks to the non-believer in a way that they see the church's actions. They see that this church isn't about just tossing Jesus at down people's throats. And that might be a little graphic, sorry, but it's not about just preaching the Bible at them, but it's about connecting with them. It's about being for the community. It's about loving others. And when this theology, this practical theology and this mission, this idea of being for Porterville is lived out, non-believers will see that, and that will draw them into the church and hearing more about why this group of people, this body of believers is living out this way of loving and caring for people when they don't have to. And then how it speaks to believers is actually helps believers know the mission. Simple, Port Naz for Porterville. That is what we're about. Helps them to know the mission and then to stay on mission, which is to go out and to make disciples. So maybe asking this question now as we move on to this journey is okay, well, how do we connect with Porterville? There's the question. How do we be for Porterville? And my answer to that would be, we have to start as a church, the Church of Port Naz. We have to start with our neighbors. And what I mean by that is if Port Naz was the dot and we drew a mile-long circle, all directions, what's going on in that directions? What schools are there? What businesses are there? What homes are there? The second question would be, well, how well do we know those schools? How well do we know those principals? How well do we know those teachers, those janitors, everyone who works there? How well do we know the businesses around us? What are they about? What are they selling? What kind of restaurants are they? What kind of people own them? Are they family owned or are they corporate owned? And the last part is the homes that are around us. We have many different types of homes that are around Porterville in just a 1 to 5 mile radius in all directions. And the different types of home we have are people who are of different ethnicities, of different jobs, of different social classes. And we have everything from very wealthy and rich to very poor. And but the question to ask now is, how well do we know those families? Do we know their stories? Do we know their struggles? Do we know their hopes, their dreams, what they want to do with their future? Do we know why or why not they believe or not believe? And the next part of that is, once we get to know them, well, what do we do after that? The next part of it is we respond with action, right? We connect with them, and then it's not like a, hey, good to see you, nice to meet you, and never talk to them again. It's to get to know them and then have action in response. And some of those could be with connecting with schools, creating a Starbucks fund where once a quarter or once a month, for the schools that are in our area, Port Naz puts aside money to literally buy coffee for every single teacher and admin and principal at one particular school every quarter, whatever it may be. And what that does is it shows those teachers and those principals and everyone who works at that school that Port Naz is for them, that we love them, and that we just acknowledge and see them as well. The next part is the business. And how do we connect when, or it's going to them and asking, hey, how can we connect with you? How can we support you? Maybe it's coming up with some kind of, people get a $5 discount when they go and eat dinner or eat lunch after church on the Sunday. And then at Sunday at church, we're encouraging people and reminding them to tip well. But the last part is homes. How do we connect with the families, and or how do we respond after connecting with families in the communities around the church? And what that could look like is maybe it's hosting a block party movie night, where also the church is open and people can come in and explore and see and experience our children's ministry center, our youth center, and our main worship center with pastors, and see our faces and see who we are, what we're about, and give tours and in a non-threatening environment. I think that's one way that we can support and welcome people onto our campus and be for them and show them who we are and what we're about. But the next question is, well, how do we be for the larger area of Porterville? And that's the next question. My answer to that is that we need to connect with the Hispanic Nazarene Church, and our church needs to know, a Church of Port Naz needs to know our history with the Hispanic Nazarene Church, and that we helped start the Nazarene Church, and we're actually supporters of the Nazarene Church, of the Hispanic Nazarene Church. And the first step to this process of being for Porterville together is this church. And why I chose the Hispanic Nazarene Church is because they are in an area of Porterville that Port Naz has struggled to connect with well. They're on the east side of town, which tends to be a little bit poorer side of town and low income, and transportation for that side of town is usually a little bit more difficult. And the Hispanic Nazarene Church is located right there. And I think that's why this partnership could work really well. And the first step of that is connecting with the Hispanic leadership, the Hispanic church leadership, and being on the same page with this mission and this idea and this theological practice of being for Porterville, both churches being for Porterville. And the second part of that is to change the current relationship narrative between Port Naz and the Hispanic Nazarene Church. And the current relationship narrative is that Port Naz is the mothership, is the mothership or the head church, and the Hispanic church is kind of down here, and Port Naz supports it. And without this, the Hispanic church without Port Naz wouldn't be able to function. And that's not how it should be. After talking with Chad, a pastor here at the church, he even mentioned to me, is like, I don't think a lot of people actually know that the Nazarene Church, the Hispanic Nazarene Church, exists. So that narrative needs to change, and showing unity and showing that we are in a partnership together, the Hispanic Church and Port Naz. And some ways of doing that could be simple as having a pastor switch on a Sunday. or a pulpit switch, and having pastors preach at each other's churches, and then after that, connecting at a park that is more on the east side of town with the Hispanic Nazarene Church, and having a potluck, and connecting in that way. And the last part is working together to be for Porterville. And what I mean by this is both churches coming together and support some kind of need, and or whether it's having some kind of big festival for the town in general, or for the east side, and coming together and mixing and mingling with families, and just providing a fun time for them. But another way could be Port Naz and the Hispanic Nazarene Church coming together to start a pay their wage fund. A lot of youth and in Porterville who are involved in sports and extracurricular activities are also part of families that depend on the picking season, and their families are pickers of the different crops and agriculture around Porterville. And if someone in their family gets sick and they can't work that day, that student has to drop everything, whether it's a test or whether it's a big game or a tournament, and they actually have to go and they have to work to not only provide for their family, but just provide in ways where their family can actually eat that day. So that's one way that Port Naz and the Hispanic Nazarene Church can work together to better be for Porterville. And in conclusion, answering this question, and this is what the journey we've gone on today of how does Port Naz better be for Porterville? The first step to that is connecting with the neighborhood around Port Naz, connecting with families, businesses, the different schools around the area, and not only connecting with them, but taking action to care for them, to love on them, to show that they see them, and that they appreciate what they're doing for our city. And then the next part of it is to grow in a bigger reach about being for Porterville, is connecting with the Hispanic church to have a greater impact. And the last part is the Hispanic and Port Naz coming together to take action and to connect the community as a whole. So that is how Port Naz can better be for Porterville. Thank you so much for watching.